Good morning. How you doing? Good.
This is unlocks. Oh, no. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for registering for this presentation and demonstration of TOCO, Theory of Change Online. I'm going to wait another minute or two for some of the people to show up, but then we'll get going. We're going to do about, I'm hoping not more than 40, 45 minutes of my talking, and then we'll have some time at the end for questions and answers. So bear with me for a couple of minutes. Oh, by the way, I'm going to switch over in the middle from slides to a live demo. So it'll take a moment or two to get that done, but that's not for another half an hour yet or so, or more. Yes, there is sound. Can you, if everyone can hear me, I hope that I hope you can all hear me. You should be able to. We've tested this out, and it should work. Good. All right. So I'm going to get going, and yes. So this first part is the slides, and I'll talk about TOCO and talk about theory of change, acknowledge its practices of theory of change, and how we do it, and how TOCO fits into it, and then we'll do a little bit of demonstrating of the software. All right. I am Dana Taplin. I'm the presenter. I have been working with theory of change at Acknowledge for about 10 years now. We have tried to develop the method and done our best to apply it and make it useful to all sorts of organizations, from community-based organizations to international development, NGOs, non-government organizations. The TOCO software is something that I've been involved with developing over most of that period of time, trying to work with the software developers to design something that would work for sort of support people in doing theory of change the way we practice it and the way we at Acknowledge in the Center for Theory of Change believe it should be done. So I'm going to switch slides here. All right, so this webinar covers basically three things: an overview of our method of doing theory of change, the features of the software, and a demonstration of some functions, and that's where I'm going to shift from slides to live demo. So what is theory of change? In process, a theory of change facilitator works with a group to articulate a long-term goal, or outcome as we call it, and then to identify all the supporting outcomes necessary to achieve that goal. As a product, theory of change features a causal pathway developed in flowchart graphics, showing how and why the particular change process is expected to unfold. And a complete theory of change includes a number of other components beyond the graphic, including outcome indicators, which measure progress, allow you to measure progress towards outcomes, and the interventions necessary to bring the change. The TOCO software, Theory of Change Online, TOCO software is useful for converting the work done on paper in facilitated sessions into a shared, editable digital format. So this slide here has a few pictures on it, which is I've selected these to depict the theory of change as a process. In the upper left, that picture, someone has, people during a session, a theory of change development session, have written out a lot of things on sticky notes, which are outcomes that they have been asked by the facilitator to identify. They've written them out on sticky notes, and now they've been put up on a vertical surface. And there are a lot of different colors, and I don't know whether the colors mean something or not. Sometimes they do at this early stage. And they've organized the notes into columns, and the columns imply, or the beginnings of the idea of a causal pathway in which the causality flows upward from the bottom. So at the top, you have the sort of higher level, longer term outcomes, and then farther down are the more immediate, shorter term ones that are necessary to achieve or to reach the longer term ones. At the right here is a picture of two people involved in a theory of change session having a good time, apparently. One is kneeling on the surface and having just arranged a group of handwritten outcomes on sticky notes into a series of rows. And the idea here is partly that this is a very tactile and very participatory process that is not about using software. I mean, in my view, it's better to do it this way, in person, face-to-face, in a group, in real time, in real space, and on paper, and really get people involved and engaged with each other. And it is a process that involves thinking, stepping back and thinking about what it is, stepping back, I should say, from the day-to-day activity that all people trying to change things in their fields, their various fields of study, stepping back from the day-to-day activity and thinking about the bigger picture, and particularly thinking about the goals, which is what theory of change is all about. So in the lower left, the picture again is of a group of people sitting around a table, maybe in a lull in the action, and there's chart in the distance. There is a screen where perhaps there's been a presentation, and now people are thinking about developing their outcomes. So this is the process, and the Theory of Change Online, the software, has been developed with that in mind as a way of supporting people after such a session, or after a series of such sessions, to take the work that was done on sticky notes or on chart paper or however they did it, and put it into a digital editable format. So it is participatory, that the in-person sessions are recommended, although not essential. And the format of the session should be flexible, with breakout groups and lots of discussion, time for reflection. So just a very simple primer on the outcomes logic of theory of change as we do it at Acknowledge. We have as you see in this very simple diagram, there's a line of accountability, a dashed line that indicates the difference between what a program is going, or initiative is going to try to measure in terms of its own achievement and the larger goals that it's contributing to. So the long-term outcome is the highest measurable one. And then there are often many preconditions, in this example, just two. And the rationale is is the reason why any particular outcome has been placed as it has been, as a precondition or as a prerequisite, or however you want to call it, a supporting outcome to the outcome above it. And here is a kind of a in-progress working example of having taken the sticky notes and taken them home after a session, and perhaps hopefully you've also taken some photos of how they were arranged on the wall. And so you can now just copy, using the software, you can copy from the sticky notes into the Canvas part of the TOCO software and begin to flesh out your theory of change. And what we have here is not particularly elegant, but it's a start. It's putting it all into the outcomes format. So we've used a different series of different colors. We have connected up the outcomes. We've arranged them in a causal flow, and we have, as you see in some of these connector lines below the yellow row and just above the yellow row, there are a series of at this point illegible, but a series of interventions that basically are the things that all the program activities that organizations are going to do to produce their outcomes. So the labels at the left say, as it says, it's a causal pathway. The causation flows upward, but the outcomes are developed mapping backward from the long term. The long-term outcome, as we practice it, is the first to be developed and identified and articulated, and then you work your way backwards or downwards through this flow. The interventions are all the activities that you do, strategies and activities that reproduce the outcomes. And the whole idea really is to consider all of this work, the actual work of the project, in the context of the results or the outcomes you're trying to achieve. And that's really what theory of change is about. And then below that, outcome indicators, I think it's off the, not quite, you can't quite read it, but the point is the outcome indicators are an important part of it, but they don't appear on the map. So let me move to the next slide. All right, so drawing out preconditions. This is we can do a whole webinar on that. We have a number of things to say, ways of doing it. We've experimented with different methods. It's one of the more challenging things in a facilitated session is to get groups to really think about what are all the outcomes or so-called preconditions that need to be identified to make a workable and plausible theory of change. But the basic method, which is what I'm going to summarize here, is asking the question that what conditions need to be in place for this outcome, whatever that longer term outcome, once you've articulated that, what conditions need to be in place for it to be achieved? And then as a kind of check, once you've identified a few of those conditions and written them out as outcomes, you ask also, are they necessary and are they sufficient in their own, or do you need others? So as it says here at the bottom, you can tune into upcoming webinars this month. At least one of them, we're planning to talk more about ways of facilitating theories of change in addition to this basic method. So the software, TOCO, is web-based. There's no download. It has been out for several years, but this is 2.0, the newer, improved version with the premium and enterprise levels of subscription. And that fact of it being web-based and no download remains true. But the TOCO 2 is now about a year and a half old. So it requires Flash Player, and you cannot use it on tablets and iPads and things that don't permit Flash Player. So that's a very basic requirement. We have, in a few years, we're going to be needing to redo the programming because Flash Player is eventually going to be going away. The browsers are going to be restricting it, and I think it's a challenge we have to face down the road a piece. But right now it works, and particularly well in Chrome and in Firefox, and I think Safari is fine too, and perhaps the basic Microsoft browser, whatever that is. There are 3 levels. There's the basic, which is a more stripped down version that's much more like the TOCO that if any of you used it between 2011 and 2017, that is the basic is more or less like that. The premium and the enterprise. You can access TOCO at toco.acknowledge.org. So here I'm going to show a few examples of the output. This is a very recent project that we did for a client, an acknowledged client, that we worked with them to develop first a theory of change. In this case, you can see up in the upper left here, we have a kind of a thumbnail of a summary graphic. The summary graphic has the long-term outcome, and it has a summary version of the 5 different component pathways. This detail here, which is the main part of this drawing, is a detail of what they call the provider pathway, but the others are in other colors, and the color coding is for that. So this is then done in TOCO with the outcomes and the connector lines. And as you see, the connector lines have different shapes, and that's a feature of both the enterprise and the premium. You can have the straight line option. You can do these curved corner connectors, and you can also do just regular right angled, which is the default. And you can change the color of the connectors, so that in this case, we've used color we've matched color with the color of the outcomes. This pathway, most of the outcomes are blue, but there are a few that are out of view down here that are like, this is a kind of pea soup color that actually corresponds to the policy pathway. So we've used a kind of a yellow-green line, connector line, to indicate that that's part of that. And there's also a curved line option, which you can see a bit of the curved line there. Some of these graphics were done with other software superimposed over the TOCO printout, the TOCO PDF, and that includes this lettering, it includes these little callouts, and this outlining. So that outlining now corresponds to what I'll show you in the next slide, which is what they call their results chains, and all the information on the left is really about very specific, concrete projects that are funded for the next 2 and 3 years, and they've outlined supporting outcomes in this dark blue, and deliverables, project deliverables, and assumptions around what it's going to take to get to those outcomes. Those in turn fold into this, which is the 2-year project outcome. None of that is actually in the theory of change, which is a higher level industry-wide theory, but you see how these arrows then connect this project to specific outcomes, this one on the policy pathway and this one on the provider pathway. So here's another example of a TOCO product. This is a much smaller, more typical kind of, but still important, community development project sponsored by United Way in the Pennsylvania region, where they're trying to create age-friendly communities. So this is the healthy aging pathway. There were also a series of others, but here we've used TOCO to kind of push the limits of its of the text boxes and the callouts that provide lots of further explanatory information about what's in the outcomes. Or I think in the case of these sort of darker text boxes that callouts, we call them, that point to the outcomes, they are actual interventions that are planned in connection with producing these outcomes. And then there's just more annotation information provided in these yellow text boxes here and here. Okay, so now I'm going to have a few slides of TOCO's features before we get into the live demo section of the presentation. So here, when you log on to the to TOCO after getting to the web pages that allow you to do it, this is the home page, or the dashboard as we call it. And this is all annotated here. So you see over here on the left, you see the file browser, or the My TOCs directory, it's called. All the theory of change files that are connected with you will appear here. This is a dashboard that an enterprise level user sees. A premium level user will not have these two little panels, but we'll have some other choices. Then this is a little bit of information from Acknowledge. And then over here is a tool panel that's a new feature for both Enterprise and Premium that allows easier manipulation of the canvas, and has a lot of features. Many of them are reproduced in the edit menu too, but they're a little easier to use when they're here. The toolbar is this section here with things like buttons that do things like undo and redo and save and export and minimize and maximize, or zoom in and zoom out, I should say. And then these are further buttons. All right. So yes, we can. The recording will be available, and we can give you a copy of the slide deck. So we're happy to do both of those things. Outcome objects. All right. So I have a few slides that are taken from the help wiki. This is basically just information about the outcome objects themselves, the way the outcome object works. Once you've entered the text, you have an outcome on your canvas, and here you have you can change the color of the outcome the fill color. Here you can click to see if there are any indicators already associated with that outcome. Here is the little thing where you draw a connection line, and that's a sizing handle. So one of the components of the theory of change as we practice it is the indicator, and is in the intervention and the rationale. So the intervention is we indicate it on the connector line between this outcome and this outcome. An intervention is an activity or program activity, some kind of task or series of tasks that are going to be done to help get you from here to here. And you have the choice in TOCO of displaying it in the default, which is a code, just for clarity, legibility, to put it in code, and then it can be reported out in a spreadsheet in full text, or to display it in full text. And here we have two interventions, and they are reported here in this version in full text. And then I think these are the two interventions, and that's the rationale. The R here corresponds to this rationale for why that outcome is a precondition to this one. The indicators are a very important part of theory of change. They are really the bridge between the theory of change as a model, as an explanatory model, forward-looking model of how the program is expected to work. The indicators make the bridge between that model and the whole project of monitoring and evaluating the work, of learning from the experience. So the indicators are, of course, very important to really measuring whether any of these outcomes are being achieved, or to understanding and interpreting how the work is unfolding in the context of the model that you've drawn using the theory of change method. So what TOCO does is it sort of gets you started on indicators. It has this very simple template that's available from the outcome editor, and it asks you basic questions. What will change? This indicator has to do with this outcome here, which is improved economic conditions of coffee production and processing. So the indicator is one of the two indicators, as you see from this little slide out tray. One of them is household income, and the other is the confidence in ability to obtain credit. So this indicator is the household income one. And so it asks you about who you're talking about. It asks you how many of them, and it asks you to how much or how good does it have to be. In other words, these improved economic conditions, what does that really mean in terms of what it takes to get up to the next outcome up here? And so here's the indicators where you get to really specify how good it has to be to get to that next level. And then you have a timeline. So that's as far as TOCO gets with the indicator development, but it's a good start. And I have an example, which is not from TOCO at all, of a much more seriously developed indicator here, where they've identified the outcome that it corresponds to. They've defined the indicator very precisely. They've given a rationale for the indicator, various definitions in this area. Here, there's sources of information, those sources of where the data is going to come from. This is a schedule box. This is about the cost of collecting the data to be able to measure that indicator, the baseline information, and so on. So it's really quite an involved thing, but important and serious if you're really going to try to operationalize these outcomes in a monitoring and evaluation and reporting context. So here is this is an important piece of it. One of the big improvements of TOCO since the original edition in 2011 is new ways of getting your content out of TOCO, off the server and into a form you can use more easily. So to make a PDF, you could go to the File menu here and you just click Save to PDF, and what you get then is a multiple page report out that has the first page is the map or the graphic, and the second page, the subsequent pages include all the other content, just very fixed PDF style descriptions of the content, including the indicators and the interventions and the rationales and and if you have a program narrative, if you've recorded your assumptions about the theory of change context, then there's a place for that, and it all gets reported out in the PDF. By the way, right here you see there's a little pop-up because Acknowledge is going to send you automatically a file that you can download. So your browser is going to block that pop-up if you haven't allowed it. So you need to allow pop-ups, that pop-up, and then you can download it and save your PDF. So the next method is using the selection tool. So this is just to retrieve a piece or all of the graphic. So you go in here to the tool panel, you click on the select, you draw a selection box around, in this case, this yellow group of outcomes, and then again you get the save to PDF pop up, and then you've got a PDF of should be a very clear, legible PDF of just that part of the canvas that you've chosen to reproduce. And then the third way is export. So what export does is gives you the whole thing, but in a different format. The export is this button on the toolbar, and what it does is give you a zip file that includes a PDF of only the graphic, and then the rest of it is reported out in a spreadsheet. You have to be able to unzip the file. So here's an XLS file, an Excel file from an export, somewhat edited for legibility. We've bumped up the font sizes. So there you see the color, the outcome, the indicator, the rationale, the intervention, and there are further columns should you have say assumptions and a program narrative for that. But this is the color. It just reports the code. It doesn't report the color itself, but you could put the colors in if you wanted to use this spreadsheet in some way to make it clear how the outcome text corresponds to the color that you see on the map. Here's all these columns are for the indicator and its various dimensions, and then this is the rationale of the intervention. Here's another example of the Excel file, and this user has fleshed it out much more fully. So she hasn't put the colors in manually, but she could. But these are the outcome expressions themselves, taken right from the graphic. This is a further description of what the outcome means, which is there's a window in the outcome editor in TOCO that allows you to enter this information. It doesn't appear on the graphic, but it appears here. And then all the indicator columns, and then rationales, and then interventions. So this is really a good start at a monitoring and evaluation tool, and it could be, and since it's completely editable, you can add other columns, and you can, of course, import it into some M&E project management tracking system, or whatever you want to do with it. So, all right. So I think that's the end of my slide presentation. As it says here, we're going to have an opportunity to answer questions during this presentation after I've demonstrated some of the features, but also you can send me any questions you have. And now I'm going to turn on. It's going to take me a minute to set up so that we can move from the slides into the live demo. So now let's just bear with me a moment while I do that. All right, let's see. All right. Okay, so this should be, I'm going to just make sure that, I'm hoping that you're all able to see this. And I have my colleague Muammer is out here to help me to verify whether it's visible. It's good. Okay, good. Thank you. All right, I think he can see it, so I guess the rest of you can. So here we have the this is the homepage, the TOCO homepage after you've logged in, or the dashboard page. Here is this is an imaginary account created for an imaginary enterprise user. The premium and the enterprise really sees more or less the same stuff. Certainly the file directory is the same, and the information, these tools are all the same. I have one file open. If you open a file, you want to just, this is actually, oh yeah, there are two sections of the directory. This only applies to enterprise people. The section here is my own list of TOCs. There's a little tooltip that comes up when you click, when you hover with your cursor over any of these things, so it tells you more or less what it is. But this is your own list of theories of change. This one is open, the coffee production one, because you see it here in the file name band. But this one is not. So let's open it. We just have to click on it once, and it opens up, and the canvas appears here. And if you want more room, you can hide your file directory, and then you can reopen it. So this is a different theory of change. And I'm going to close that now because I want to show you the coffee one. So here we have this shows you a number of the examples, as kind of an example of a number of the features that are available both to the premium and the enterprise levels of subscription. And this is really maybe of more interest to anyone who's used TOCO in the past, prior to, I think, February of 2017, when we didn't have all these features. But one of them is, for all these outcomes, you have lots of font choices. You can change the fonts. You can increase their size or make them smaller and larger. You can make them different colors. Of course, there's a lot of fill color choices too. We have callouts. This is a callout. You grab that and you can point it towards whatever you're looking for. You get the callout on the edit menu, and it has the text box fill color. The callouts are text boxes. The outcomes, in a sense, are text boxes too, but we call them outcomes. And then there's another text box feature that doesn't point to anything, but you can just add it here, and you have to move it. Right-click to move it. You can fill it out. You can put text in it. You can change the background color. You can change the fonts. You can remove the border or use the border as you wish. This gives you an example of another example of the interventions. I'm zooming in here so you can see. There's a rationale for that one, and 3 interventions. And if we double click, we can see that there's 3 interventions. And if we double click, we can see that there's 3 callouts. And if we double click, we can see that there's 3 callouts. And if we double click, we can see that there's 3 callouts. And if we double click, we can see that there's 3 callouts. And if we double click, we can see that there's 3 callouts. And if we double click, we can see that there's 3 callouts. And if we double click, we can see that there's 3 callouts. And if we double click, we can see that there's 3 callouts. And if we double click, we can see that there's 3 callouts. And if we double click, we can see that there's 3 callouts. And if we double click, we can see that there's 3 callouts. And if we double click, we can see that there's 3 callouts. And if we double click, we can see that there's 3 callouts. And if we double click, we can see that there's 3 callouts. And if we double click, we can see that there's 3 callouts. And if we double click, we can see that there's 3 callouts that is entered on the connector line. So you double click on the connector, and we'll get the connector editor, which is where there's the rationale is put in there. Here's the first intervention, and then there's the second intervention. So you have the option of displaying that in full text. And if you do, then this is what it could look like. Here's this I believe is looks like an intervention. And it has been formatted somewhat so that otherwise the text will spread all the way across in a single line, but you have to use your return key to break it up into a better size. But it seemed to be a useful idea to have the option of displaying either your interventions or your rationales in full text. And you have a choice of outcome shapes now. On this tool panel, you see this is the curved box, but you have also triangles and circles and squares and pentagons and hexagons and octagons. You can change the color of the box of a new box by clicking here, as well as clicking on an existing box to change its color. And then there's a grid. The standard theory of change comes, I think it should come with just a grid and a clear background, but it shows a grid. So you can uncheck that to remove the grid for printing purposes, and then there are also these background choices, which are available down here. You have a few to choose from. Most of them are pretty subtle. But this one, for example, is not at all subtle. It's a sort of a wood surface. Anyway, this is one of the more subtle background choices. It looks like a woven fabric. And up here is the accountability ceiling. I've used a small text box with no fill color, just to explain what that is. This is the title box. You can, as with all these text box objects, you can change the font size so that it's very legible. And there. So now, and one more thing is just that you can. Oh yeah, you can change the shape of these connectors. So if I wanted to make this one a straight line, I'm right-clicking now, and they're now a straight line. Or I can make it a rounded corner connector, which is sort of like these, except these are very sharp right angles, and this is a rounded corner, and that's it. The default when you draw the connector line is going to be this sharp right angle. And then the only other thing is that, and this is a major feature, is that you can use the select tool to say select a portion of a diagram, and then to drag it and move the whole thing around. I'm going to put it back. You can also use that to copy it, make a copy of it, and paste it into another TOCO file somewhere else, or in another part of this file if you have room on your canvas. So that's a great feature, and you can also use that this to print. Say if we wanted to print just that pathway, I get to save to PDF. So I right-click and I save it to PDF, and then I get the little pop-up, and then I get a PDF just of that section. So now, supposing we have done we've been at one of those live sessions that I was showing pictures of, and you've come back to the office, and we have a whole briefcase full of sticky notes and maybe chart paper too, with all sorts of assumptions and other things written on that. And we want to now use the software to capture all that messy stuff and put it into an editable, digital, shareable format. So let's suppose all we have here is instead of a finished, simplified but finished TOC, all we have is the sticky notes. So we want to start producing a new TOCO file that has all that content in it, so we can share it with our colleagues or our clients or whoever they are. So we're going to create new, and then we are going to pick the name for the TOC. I'll just call it coffee example, and then we go next, and we choose either landscape or portrait. This isn't really such an important choice, since now with the new version you can switch back and forth at any time. And then the title of the long-term outcome, which is I think it is sustainable coffee. I forget what it is. Production. It says it up here, but anyway, it doesn't matter. Just for the purposes of showing you. So now we have a outcome on a canvas with that grid background. The outcome is in a color that's not going to work for our, let's give it a lighter color so that you can actually, oh, I can't actually change it that way. I have to change it this way. There, now you can actually read it. Okay, so now if you recall, we decided that this pathway, this sourcing pathway would be red. And then this environment pathway would be turquoise, and then this one is a darker blue. So I'm going to just push out a bunch of outcome boxes, outcome objects that I can then use to, and I'm going to select that red. Let's say it's something like, let's say it's this one. Yep. And then I'm going to just put a few of those on the canvas. And I'm going to move them over here, and because they belong on the right side, maybe I have more than I need. But then to actually populate that, it just says empty outcome title. So I double click on the image, on the box, and then I can enter the text, which would be, let's call it my first sourcing. And there it is, and it should show up. There it is, right? And then the next one, you can put that in, whatever that is, content 2, and then this one is whatever that is, there. Now, as we say, we have the option of changing the font size. It's easy enough to do. You have to reselect it, and then you can change it. Let's say we wanted to make it, we don't like for Verdana, we want it to be Arial, and we want it to be a little bigger, so we'll make it 18, and there it is. So now it's a little bigger. And then you also have the option, if you want to do the same formatting for all of your outcomes, is to open it up, select it, and then click here where it says apply to all outcomes. And I'm going to redo the bold part there. So that should work. So now they're all going to have the same size of font. This is the important thing to demonstrate here, if you haven't tried to do it yourself, is how to draw these connector lines. The connector is drawn from this little squiggly create an arrow. The tooltip says create an arrow. You click once, move your cursor up to the destination, and then click again. And here we'll do it again. We will click here, release, click again, release, and there's your connector. It's pretty easy, but it just takes a little bit of getting the hang of. Click, release, you see it forming, and you click again and release. And then, as I was saying, these can all be made into straight lines, or you can make them into rounded corners, and you can do what you want. So now, as we have another set of colors, we have the turquoise. So let's push out a few of those. We're going to change the color selector, and maybe this one is close enough. That one's pretty good. All right, so we'll put out a few of those. So then you would line these up. You can, as I was saying before, you can use your select tool to move the whole group of them around, but this is more or less where we want them. And then we had also the dark blues. So let's go to a darker blue and push a few of those out. You can begin to populate them. And then it's beginning to look a bit like what it looks like here. And I would just say, now my grid has come back, so I want to unclick that, right. So now these ones, as you notice, are, since they're dark blue, they're going to need to have the text made white. So when we do that, we're going to the default is always black, and it's always the same size. So what we're going to do is make it, stick with the Verdana for now, but we'll make it larger, and then we're going to select white for the text. So now that is how it's done. You do have to do it manually. It doesn't do it automatically. But for any If you want to use a dark background, that's what you're going to want to do. One other thing I want to show you on the canvas here is the idea of being able to put, as in this case, you have two outcomes in a group. You've collected them because they're conceptually so related to each other that we put them in a group, in this case, a pair. So we're going to put this one and this one together, and then we're going to use this one as a grouping box. So we move that over. I'm going to change the color just to a light gray, and I move that over. Now I use the sizing handle, which is this lower right-hand corner, and I'm going to drag it over so it covers those two. And then I'm going to right-click and send it to back. So it's going to put it underneath the other two. And then I'm going to click on it, and my title is going to slide up so that I can use the title if I want to identify what the group is. In this case, we didn't have that. So what we're going to do is double-click and put in anything, and then which you see it beginning to show up here, and then erase it, and then we will have an empty outcome box that reads as just a collection. And then, of course, this one too would need to have white text for whatever it is, and that allows you then to not have so many connecting arrows as well. So you can just connect that pair with one single arrow there, and then you can connect it this way with that outcome, and you have one single arrow. So that's more or less how that goes. So okay, so I want to go back to the dashboard and show you a few things about, particularly that have to do with enterprise. So the enterprise is really the part that the premium has all the good export and printing functions, and it has all the canvas features that have been upgraded since the original edition. Enterprise is really for teamwork. It's for working together, for collaborating, assuming you have not only one person doing the digital input using the TOCO software to create the diagrams and share them with PDFs, but you in fact want other people on the team or involved in the project to be able to log in to TOCO and have their own accounts, but be able to also collaborate together in the same workspace by reading and commenting on and editing theory of change diagrams. So that's what Enterprise is built for, and it allows groups or teams. So the Enterprise user here has a little panel that shows him. This is Horace Slughorn. If any of you are familiar with Harry Potter, that's where that name comes from. Slughorn has one group. His group is called, this is all made up silly stuff, but it's called Lusitania Survivors, and there are only 2 people. He could add some more. His enterprise subscription would come with 3 slots, and without having to pay any extra. But so far he only has 2 users, so he could add a few more. He can create a new group here, but for the enterprise user, the best way the most effective way, certainly I think maybe the only way of making the full use of the features is by going to the My Account button up here and clicking, and that brings up now a panel which allows the enterprise user the owner of the enterprise account to add people. You can see this little thing, it says add users. You can add users by clicking there. That brings up a panel in which he enters the name and email and so on. This is for a new user. This would be your enterprise, you as the enterprise admin for your account, to add people who aren't TOCO users already. New users, you have to give them name and a username, and you have to pick a password for them and do all that. And then if you have also people who are existing users but haven't been added to your enterprise account, this is the way to do that. You click on the existing users, they're going to get an access key, which they will take out of an email and then enter into the TOCO system, and that will connect them to your enterprise account so that you can share files with them. All right, so that is that, and then this is showing the 2 users, and then you also have a groups tab. So the idea here is that if you had a fairly large project and you had 20 different people involved in different ways, and you wanted them all to have some level of participation in the theory of change development or in the management of the theory, you could set up 2 or 3 different work groups, or however many you wanted. There's just one here, but we can create a new group using that little button by clicking there, and you put the group name, and then you select all your users, TOCO users who you want. Again, this, you might have, if you had 20 people, then you'd be able to select the ones from your account that you want to put into this group. And then you can also assign status. This is for version control. So you can make a person a reviewer, which means they basically have only read-only access to the file, but they can also make comments on it and save the comments for other people on the team to view. And a contributor can edit, and then a manager can be somebody who actually manages the team and who's on the team and what theory of change files are shared with the team. And so then you enter that data and you can save the group. So you can also edit things about a particular member of the team, change their status in general, and you can remove people, add people and remove people from groups. So it's all set up to enable people to share files. And the basic way of sharing a file is by going back to the file directory, and for the enterprise admin to be able to just right-click here, right-click to get this menu, and then share the TOC. And you want to, I think you want to select your group. We have only the one, but if I click there, it's going to say that this coffee example is now shared with that work group or that team. And if I have other teams, I could have a choice. So then the people who are on the team get, on the shared file side of their file browser, shared TOCs. Those are all the ones that have been shared by other TOCO users with this Horace user. This user whose first name is Horace. So these are Horace's own files, and these are shared ones. And he can open a shared one and use the Save As feature from the file menu to create his own copy of it. So that's another way that's how some of these got into his personal files, my list of TOCs, as the tooltip says, by opening something that was shared with him and then saving it as his own. So let's see, what else did I want to cover? Yes, right. And that's about it, really. If you want to delete a file, you can press you right-click and delete the TOC, and that'll remove it from your file altogether, from your file directory. All right, so now I'm going to go back to let's see if I can go back to my, or maybe I'll just minimize this window and see if I can find, no, that's not a good idea. I want to get to the point where I can see the questions. So this is the point in the webinar for anyone who has questions. So I need to bring that back up. Let's see, this is where I'm, yes, here we are. Okay, so I see there are some questions, and I'm going to try and see if I can figure out how to answer these. Oh, here we go. Hello, good day. People can hear. Good, I'm glad you can hear. Will we get a recording? You can, we'll make a copy of the slide deck available, and I think you just need to drop me a line at my dtaplin@acknowledge.org, and I can send you the copy of the presentation. The recording should be available on the webinar, on Webinar Jam for a limited time. So if you want to hear it again, you can do that. Let's see, what else? Recording, okay, from my side. Do you have a free manual? Oh, well, okay, so I should really go back to this, because that's an important thing. That's a very good question. We have a free manual. Now, can you see? I'm hoping you can see what I'm showing. It does say you can see, right. So I'm going to click here on the help menu, or I'm going to click here, either one. And that takes us to a wiki, the help wiki, which opens right up. And these are the sections. There's getting started, which is this, it's already open. It talks about TOCO 2.0, some troubleshooting, talks about what theory of change online is. And then we have a section on Canvas tools. There's the contents. There are lots of little diagrams in here. Some of these I took from the wiki to do my presentation. You may be familiar, having just seen this one a few minutes ago. There are others that explains all of the different parts of it. So if you have any questions, this is an easy place to get your answers. This is all about the Canvas, the toolbar, the file menu, the edit menu, what all these different things do, the file directory. All right, so now that's the Canvas tools. This is the create a TOC one, how to start. This is the website that you go to either register or to log in. And this is creating a new one, and this is all about the dashboard and all the more information on the tools. We have a few embedded videos here on the wiki, so you can see those. Here's the more information on the dashboard. I don't know, forget why we seem to do that. This tells you again, this is the personal files icon and the shared files icon. So it's all explained. Printing and exporting data is the next section. It's all explained, and it should be, tells you how to do it. And here's a video of the select, save, print sequence, if that would be helpful. And then at the end is Enterprise, using Enterprise and all of the Enterprise features, some of which I showed and demonstrated, but it tells you, it lays it out in considerable detail. So that's, again, available at the help button or the help menu. All right. So kindly forward the link to this. The network here is pretty bad. All right, so we'll do that. Yeah, that's the manual is, you can print out whatever you want from that wiki, of course. Would feedback loops be of value to a TOC? Well, I think they could be. It is basically, as you see, it's a linear presentation. It's a linear model. It either flows from top to bottom, or it flows from left to right. I haven't shown a left to right example, but that's perfectly doable in TOCO, as you wish. Feedback loops, we have the curved line feature. I think in general, in theory of change, a feedback loop is something that we've done in a more schematic way rather than a precise way. The connectors are in TOCO are made to be very precise, to connect particular outcomes and to show where interventions or project work will make the difference between reaching an outcome and not reaching it. So feedback loops can be very useful. It's maybe a little too complicated to do in other than a very general way, at least in TOCO, is how, or even in using theory of change is how at least we practice it. But I think I certainly have done feedback loops as I say, in a more general way to show how once you reach higher level outcomes, it can fold back, it can redound to the benefit of outcomes at the lower level and broaden the scope and increase the acceptance of people in a particular arena, so that the earlier outcomes that are achieved in a more limited way at the beginning of a project will have a fuller acceptance and be more fully realized later on. So that's a good example of where a feedback loop could make a difference and show something important in the context of the theory of change. Somebody asks if the connectors can be curved. The connectors themselves cannot be curved, but you can use the curved line feature, which is on the edit menu, to draw a curved line that sort of can serve as a connector. It's just a curved line object, so you have to manually connect it to the two outcomes that you want to connect that way. But I've used it quite a bit, and it works pretty well. The program seems complicated and hard to use. Is there a manual? Right. Well, you know, one of the people here who has left recently, but always said he's excellent. He's an excellent facilitator and excellent, in many ways. But he was the first to admit he wasn't a software wasn't very comfortable with a lot of software, but he felt that TOCO, in its earlier version at least, was very intuitive and easy to use. Now, I think as we've bumped it up here and made it more powerful, it's gotten a little more complicated. I think I feel that still at the premium level, where you're not talking about creating teams and sharing files and so on, it's pretty intuitive. But I hope you will find that the wiki is very helpful, and certainly you can always write to us and ask us questions. And particularly if you choose to get an enterprise subscription, which is a few $100s versus something just under $100 for the year, then we'll give you a lot of support, because you may not need it, but if you do, we're happy to help you figure out how to make the teams work and share the files and make it all smooth. So, but I do think that the manual the help wiki is a pretty substantial manual. Is there any point in purchasing the basic or the premium level? So, well, the important functions, someone says that the important functions seem to be only available at the enterprise level. So I guess that depends on what you mean, but the premium level has all of the graphical capabilities that I explained and showed, the font changes and different connector shapes and so on. And it has the printing power of the same printing power as the enterprise. It generates those spreadsheets, which can be very useful. You have different ways of extracting the content, TOC content from TOCO. The only difference in enterprise is that you can share files and set up work teams, and if that's important, then that's really the advantage of the enterprise. And it really doesn't make sense for someone who's just working on their own. But I mean, you can use theory of change online. You can use TOCO, say, in a Skype session. You would involve other people. You can open up you can share your screen and work on the diagram, developing it further, discussing it with people sharing or participating with you from different locations. It's really only the enterprise is useful if you really want people to be engaged in creating the theory and managing it, and be able to log in on their own and be able to open the files, contribute one to another, and exchange comments, hear other people's thinking, and be able to do it from remote sites. That's the power of the enterprise level subscription. So someone says, I'm new to theory of change. Do we have previous tutorials for those who are new to follow? Well, there's a lot of information on the websites, Act Knowledge's website and the Center for Theory of Change website, which is just theoryofchange.org. So you can see a lot of info about theory of change itself. And TOCO, as I say, you have access to this webinar, to the actual recording at least for a limited time. We can send you the slide deck, and you can read the wiki. And beyond that, we can answer questions. And cause and effect fishbone diagram. Well, I don't know about that. It doesn't seem to quite connect with what we're doing, but I'm not quite sure. What are some of the largest maps you have handled? Number of outcomes. Some of our maps exceeded 250. Yeah. Well, I think it's the canvas. The tool panel has controls to widen the canvas. You can make it wider and wider, and then you can make it higher and higher. So there's a lot of room to add outcomes. I think 250, in my sense, in my experience in practicing, would be beyond the limit of what anyone would want to read on a single page. But as I showed with the one example, you can have multiple breakdowns or component parts of the theory of change, which on one canvas covers one part of it, and another canvas covers another part of it, and then they all connect to this summary diagram. So that's kind of how we imagined it. But anyway, the canvas is quite expandable and contractible, so that you can also, can be important to cut it down to size for that relatively small theory, like my coffee production example with only, I don't know, a dozen outcomes or so. You don't want to print it out and have a great huge thing with a tiny diagram in it. So you can cut down. One way to solve that problem is to reduce the width and the depth of the canvas so that it basically just prints out what you want. So someone says, I've been called to a meeting, look forward, right, okay. Intimidated, but I would like to share once I got started, it was surprisingly easy to use. Well, that's good. I'm pleased to hear that. Stacy says it was surprisingly easy. As I was saying, my colleague Owen Collins, who doesn't claim to be any kind of software expert or even be comfortable, very, very comfortable with it, is found that TOCO was pretty easy to use. So that's good. Okay, so any other questions? When I export, the Excel is not friendly at all. It shows a lot of signs, numbers, and it isn't organized in rows as yours. And how could I eventually use the enterprise version for consulting services? Would it be mine and share it only during the process? Well, I think if I were a consultant, if I were working as a consultant, I would stick with the premium for now and not try to share the TOCs. As a premium subscriber, you could, of course, if you were working with somebody, if you were working as a consultant for someone, I would say you would just prepare the diagram yourself and send them a PDF. Send your client a PDF of it and ask them what they think, and they can get back to you. Or you can do a Skype session with them and have them actually see your screen, and then you can manipulate the outcomes or whatever you want to do with them. But enterprise is really for organizations. So if you are working for a foundation, or you're working for an NGO, or you're part of some larger organization, then perhaps, or different organizations that are participating together, in some kind of collective impact initiative, then it's a perfect application of the enterprise level subscription. The Excel file the examples I showed yes, you have to edit your file, because it doesn't really know on its own how wide, I think that the columns all come out the same width. You have to maybe select the wrap text feature for some of the cells so that you can read it. You have to do some things, but it should work pretty well. Yes, so someone says that it's easier to use than tools like Visio. Well, it is. It's definitely easier than Visio. And Visio is very powerful, and so is OmniGraffle, which is a great program that I've used a lot, which is a Mac Apple equivalent of Visio, which is, of course, a Microsoft product. But they are very powerful flowchart programs, and you can do a lot of beautiful drawings with them. But the thing about TOCO is that it's built for theory of change, so it has this relational database. You put in your outcomes, you put in your indicators, it has spaces for rationales and interventions, and you can work with all those features to develop your theory and make it more comprehensive and more rigorous, and use the indicators and the interventions and the rationales to really kind of check the logic of why you're organizing the theory the way you're doing it. And it works very well for theory of change. So I'm glad you agree. But if you really want to do beautiful diagrams with lots of different shapes, and there's a limit to what we can do with TOCO, but it does pretty good level work. So someone asked if software is only in English. It is. It's only in English. Yes, I think the big challenge we have right now is to over the next couple of years is going to be to get it out of Adobe Flash, because the Flash player, which is required, is not, as I was saying, is not going to be available too much longer, another year or two, couple of years, I think. But we're assured at least two more years. But that's our big challenge. But it would be very nice to have. We did actually try. We were thinking of a Japanese version. We don't have a Japanese version yet, but it all takes a lot of money. And so, if you know of any angels or investors who would love to get involved in this, we'd love to hear about it. Okay, so do I have any other questions? I think The accountability ceiling. Yes, the accountability ceiling is to distinguish between, is to basically show the aspirational, to show that why the long-term outcome, as we call it, the long-term outcome is the thing that is the result that your program or your initiative wants to achieve, and that you're going to try to take credit for and measure progress on. Whereas if you're, say, talking about if you're strengthening your capacities as a small community organization, your long-term outcome is going to be something around that has to do with your organization's abilities and your reach and the extent and the effectiveness of your work. But you're doing this because you want to contribute to a healthier or safer or more equitable community or state or whatever the larger arena is. And so the ultimate outcomes, which are the ones above the accountability line, are what you're aspiring to contribute to. But you're not trying to measure those because that's way beyond the scope of what you can do. So how many projects can be active concurrently? Is there any archiving of retired projects? There is archiving, but you can have as many. Certainly, there's no limit on the number of files you can have in TOCO. You can have many files. I think if you have a basic account, you can only have a few files, and the others get archived, active, only 5 or 6 active files, and the others are archived, although they can be retrieved. But with the premium and the enterprise level subscriptions, you can have any number of files. What you can't have with enterprise is any number of users. You get 3 with the basic subscription price, and then you can add for a nominal fee. You can add more users up to maybe an unlimited number, but nobody is going to want an unlimited number of TOCO users on one project. So anyway, so I hope you've all enjoyed this and gotten something out of it, and I would encourage you, if some of you perhaps took advantage of the trial subscription, or have taken or still want to take advantage of this trial subscription where you get to try it out for a month for $10, and that's a pretty good deal. But enterprise is I don't know, several hundred, $500 or $600. The premium is only $96, the full premium for a year, and it allows you to do a lot of good things with Theory of Change. So I certainly encourage you to take out premium subscriptions and if it meets your needs, to consider an enterprise subscription. As I said, we'll give you all the support you need to try to make it work for you and set you up. So I think I've answered the questions, and we have extra time, but if there aren't any more, we can wrap it up. Thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing your comments and sharing with you our slide deck, and if you want to listen to the thing again, you'll be able to do it. Oh, I have one more question. How do you draw an explanation as your upper left corner? I'm not sure. Well, I'll get back to you. That's Carmen de Vila. We'll talk about that. I'm not quite sure what you mean, so I need to. All right, very good. Thanks so much to everyone, and goodbye.